Welcome, my friend. I'm glad you are here tonight. No one gave you an instruction manual for your body the day you were born. You know why you can sleep 8 full hours and still wake up feeling tired. It's because your body was resting, but your soul was wandering. When you sleep, your soul can drift away to wherever it wishes. It doesn't bring your brain with it, so you don't remember where it went. During the day, you go to school, read books, and fill your brain with knowledge, but your soul remains untouched by that learning. Your soul is like a curious 3-year-old child. The moment your body rests, it wants to run, to play, to jump from place to place, chasing whatever catches its attention. This is something few people ever speak about, yet it quietly shapes how you feel each morning. That's why I invite you to listen to a Zen story as you fall asleep. Even while your body drifts into slumber, your soul will hear it. And like a child fascinated by a tale, it will stay close, listening deeply. While it listens, it learns. While it learns, it grows. In this way, your soul nourishes your energy. Your chakras strengthen. And by morning, you awaken not just rested, but aligned. Because when your energy is good, the day flows smoothly, and good things are naturally drawn to you. The story we will walk together tonight is about a young seeker, a student who learns that obstacles are not blocks in our path, they are the path itself. It is told in a simple way, like sitting beside an old monk, listening by the fire, while the night grows quiet around you. As you listen, I invite you to let the images flow gently through your mind, like clouds drifting across the sky. You don't have to hold on to anything. Just follow the story and let it carry you toward rest. So settle in, find your most comfortable position, take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel your body grow heavier, your thoughts quieter. Let's begin the story. There is a story I want to share with you, a story that begins in a valley where the mountains stand so tall their peaks vanish into the clouds. The air in this valley is always cool in the mornings, filled with the smell of pine and the sound of running streams. In this valley there was a monastery built from stone and wood, simple and quiet, where monks lived their days in prayer, work, and silence. The people of the nearby villages often looked to this place as a shelter for wisdom, a place where hearts could find rest, even if only for a while. Inside this monastery lived an elder, a monk named Master Liang. He was not known far and wide. He had no riches, no titles, but everyone in the valley trusted him. He had lived long enough to see the ways of the world. He knew storms, hunger, loss, and also the peace that could come after. His beard was white, his steps were slow, but his eyes carried the calm of a deep river. People said when he looked at you, it felt like he was seeing past your worries and into the part of you that was still whole. There was also a young monk there named Wei. He had only recently joined the monastery, and he was restless. He wanted answers quickly. When the monks sat in meditation for hours, his legs ached and his thoughts ran wild. When they chanted, his voice grew impatient. When they walked slowly, he wanted to run ahead. He respected his teacher, but he often wondered, why must life be so slow? Why must everything take so long? He thought wisdom should come like lightning, sharp and sudden, but in the monastery, it came like water dripping on stone, little by little, almost unnoticed. One morning, when the mist was clearing and the sun was turning the mountain tops gold, Master Liang called a group of monks, including Wei, to join him on a walk. These walks were not ordinary. They were lessons disguised as journeys. The monks would walk in silence, watching each step, feeling the ground under their feet, breathing with the rhythm of the earth. The walk itself was the teaching. They climbed higher and higher, through paths lined with tall pine trees and wildflowers. The air grew thin, the ground uneven, but they walked calmly. Wei followed, but inside he grumbled. His feet hurt, his stomach growled, and his mind kept asking, "What is the point of this?" Finally, the narrow path turned, and there before them was a huge boulder sitting squarely in the middle of the way. It was massive, as tall as two men, rough and unmoving. The path was completely blocked. The younger monks sighed. Some muttered under their breath. Wei felt a flash of anger. After all this climbing, the way was closed. What a waste of time! But Master Liang stood still, looking at the stone as if he had expected it. His eyes softened, and after a while he said quietly, "This is good." The monks looked at him, confused. Wei nearly laughed out loud. How could this be good? The path was blocked. They could go no further. One of the monks asked, "Master, why do you say this is good?" "The way is closed." Master Liang nodded. "Yes, the way is closed. But perhaps this is the way." Wei frowned. His thoughts raced. How can a blocked path be the true path? A path is meant to be clear, open, easy to follow. If it is blocked, then the journey is over, is it not? Yet his teacher's voice carried a weight that made him pause. He stayed silent, waiting. The old master told them all to sit down near the boulder. They obeyed, and soon his calm voice began to tell a story. Long ago, he said, a king placed a great rock in the middle of the road that led to his city. He wanted to see how people would react. Many came along that road. Merchants, travelers, soldiers. They saw the rock and they cursed it. They said, "Why must this be here? Who put it in our way?" But they walked round it and moved on, thinking only of their delay. Some tried to push it, but only for a moment. When it did not move, they gave up quickly. Days passed. Then one poor farmer came with his cart of vegetables. He saw the stone, and instead of blaming or turning back, he set his cart down. He thought for a long time. Then he found a branch, strong and long, and used it as a lever. He dug at the earth under the rock with his hands. His back ached, his arms trembled, but he did not stop. Finally, the stone shifted, and with one last push, he rolled it aside. And what did he find? Beneath the stone was a bag of gold, with a note from the king. The note said, "The obstacle is the path. Those who face it with patience will find hidden treasure." The monks sat in silence. The wind moved gently through the trees. Wei's heart was stirred, though he tried not to show it. "The obstacle is the path." He repeated the words in his mind, but they seemed strange. He thought of his own life, the hunger of his childhood, the cold winters, the sickness that took his mother. Were those obstacles part of his path too? Were they teachers in disguise? The thought made his chest tighten. Master Liang stood, placed his hand on the boulder, and said, We wish for smooth roads, but smooth roads teach us little. It is the stones that shape our feet. It is the steep climb that strengthens our lungs. It is the storm that teaches us to build shelter. Without obstacles, we remain weak. With them, we grow. The monks began to try. Some climbed at the sides of the rock, pulling on tree roots. Others tested the ground around it, digging at the soil. Wei pressed his shoulder against the stone and pushed with all his strength. His arms shook, his breath came in gasps, but the boulder did not move. Frustration filled him like fire. He felt useless. The master's hand touched his shoulder gently. "Do not fight with anger," he said. "Obstacles are not moved by force alone, but by patience and wisdom. You must meet them with your whole self, not just your strength." The monks worked together. Some failed, some tried again. The boulder did not roll away, but slowly they noticed things. They saw how the soil shifted when they dug, how a stick could serve as a lever, how their bodies became steadier with each effort. The rock had not moved, but it had already begun to teach them. At last, when the sun was high, Master Liang said it was time to return. Their clothes were dusty, their arms sore, but none complained. Even Wei felt something different, though he still could not explain it. It was as if the rock had shown him a mirror of himself, his impatience, his weakness, but also his strength that could grow. On the way down the mountain, the same path looked different. The same stones, the same roots, the same trees, but Wei noticed them now. His steps were slower, his eyes softer. He saw beauty where before he saw only obstacles. That night, the monastery was quiet. The chanting was over. The lamps burned low. Wei sat alone in the courtyard, looking at the stars. The mountain was dark in the distance, and somewhere up there, the boulder still waited. He thought again of the words, "The obstacle is the path." He let them echo inside him, soft and steady. He realized he had always run from obstacles, cursed them, hated them. But what if they were not enemies? What if they were guides? What if the very things he feared were the doorway he needed to walk through? The crickets sang, the wind touched his face, and he felt a calm he had never felt before. He did not yet understand fully, but he no longer needed to. It was enough to know that his journey had begun, not away from obstacles, but into them. And in that stillness of night, Wei closed his eyes, ready for whatever the path would bring next. Morning came gently to the monastery. The sky turned pale blue, the mist rose from the river, and the sound of bells echoed softly across the valley. The monks began their day as always, sweeping the courtyard, tending the gardens, fetching water, lighting lamps. Life was ordinary, yet each action was treated with care, as though even the smallest task carried a hidden lesson. Wei, the young monk, woke with a mind still filled by the memory of the great boulder on the mountain. He could not shake the feeling it had left in him. His body was still sore from trying to push it, but more than that, his thoughts kept circling around his master's words. The obstacle is the path. He repeated the phrase over and over, yet the meaning slipped from him like water through his fingers. He felt both restless and drawn to it, as if a door had been shown to him but not yet opened. After breakfast, when the monks had gathered in the courtyard, Master Liang looked over them and said, Today we will not climb the mountain. Today we will work in the fields. The valley had rice paddies and vegetable gardens, and though the work was simple, it demanded patience. The monks walked together down the dirt path toward the fields. The air was warmer now, the sun climbing higher, the soil soft from last night's dew. The work began. Some monks planted seedlings, bending low and pressing roots into the earth. Others pulled weeds, their hands sinking into the wet soil. Wei was given a basket of water to carry and pour into each small plant. At first he worked quickly, splashing water from one row to the next, but soon he felt his arms ache, the basket growing heavy, his breath sharp. He slowed down and frustration returned. He thought, "Why must I carry this water alone? Why does the work never end?" He looked across the field and saw Master Liang kneeling in the mud, carefully pressing a seed into the ground. His movements were slow, unhurried, and yet full of attention, as though that one seed mattered more than anything else in the world. Wei paused, watching, and in that moment he realized that his own rushing made the work harder. When he poured water too fast, much of it spilled and was wasted. When he hurried his steps, the basket tilted and strained his shoulders. But when he slowed, even slightly, the basket grew lighter, his breath steadier, his movements smoother. The obstacle of the heavy basket was still there, but he began to see it differently. It was teaching him how to walk, how to breathe, how to notice. The obstacle was not only in front of him, it was also within him. His impatience, his desire for speed, his refusal to endure that was the real stone in his path. Later, when the work was done and the monks sat beneath the shade of a tree, Master Liang spoke to them. "The field does not hurry," he said. "The seed does not rush to grow. Rain comes when it comes. Sun shines when it shines. If we fight against the pace of nature, we suffer. But if we walk with it, we find peace." Obstacles are often nothing more than our refusal to move with life. Wei listened quietly. The words sank into him slowly, like water soaking into dry earth. He thought again of the boulder on the mountain. Perhaps the rock had been less about the stone itself and more about what it revealed inside him: his anger, his rush, his weakness. In the afternoon, Master Liang called Wei to walk with him to the river. They carried buckets together, filling them with water to bring back to the monastery. The river was calm, its surface shimmering under the sun. Fish darted just beneath, and dragonflies skimmed the water. Master Liang dipped his bucket slowly, letting it fill without spilling a drop. Wei tried to do the same, but in his haste, water splashed over the sides. He sighed, frustrated with himself. The master smiled. "Wei, do you know the story of the cracked pot?" Wei shook his head. There was once a water bearer who carried 2 pots on a pole across his shoulders. One pot was perfect, the other had a crack in it. Each day, when he reached the master's house, the perfect pot delivered all its water, but the cracked pot arrived half empty. The perfect pot laughed at the cracked one, saying, "You are useless. You waste water every day." The cracked pot felt ashamed. One day it said to the water bearer, "I am sorry. I spill half of what I carry. I am a burden to you." But the water bearer smiled and said, "Have you not noticed the flowers along your side of the path? I planted seeds there, and you watered them every day without knowing. Now I have a garden because of you." Wei walked in silence, holding his bucket carefully. The story stayed with him. He realized that even what seemed like weakness or failure could carry hidden gifts. An obstacle could be a doorway, even if it did not look like one. Back at the monastery, evening came. The monks gathered for chanting. The sound of their voices rose and fell, deep and steady, filling the hall with a rhythm that echoed through the stone walls. Wei closed his eyes and let the sound carry him. He thought of the farmer who moved the king's stone, the cracked pot watering flowers, the heavy basket teaching him patience. Each story was like a thread, and slowly they began to weave together into something larger. Later that night, when the lamps were dim and the stars filled the sky, Wei sat alone again in the courtyard. He remembered his own life before the monastery. He remembered carrying wood for his family through the cold winters, the ache in his arms, the hunger in his belly, the grief when his mother passed away. He had always thought those were cruel accidents, things that stole from him. But now, sitting under the stars, he began to wonder if those hardships had shaped him the way stones shape a river's flow. Maybe without them, he would not be here, sitting in this monastery, learning from his master. Maybe those obstacles were already the path that led him here. The thought brought tears to his eyes, but not from sadness. They were tears of recognition, as though he had seen his own story from a higher place. The pain was still pain, but it was no longer meaningless. He stayed there until the night grew cold, then returned to his room. He lay on his simple mat, listening to the crickets, and whispered to himself, "The obstacle is the path." And this time, the words did not feel like a riddle. They felt like a seed planted deep inside him, waiting to grow. The days passed in the monastery, each one simple, each one quiet, yet within that simplicity lessons unfolded. Morning bells, sweeping, prayer, work in the gardens, meals of rice and vegetables, meditation until the sun went down. To a visitor, it might have seemed repetitive, even dull. But for the monks, each day was an opportunity to see themselves more clearly. For Wei, the young monk, something inside him had begun to shift since the day of the great boulder on the mountain. He still grew restless, still impatient, but now he noticed it. He saw how quickly his mind leapt forward, how often his heart pushed against the moment, how his body fought even simple tasks. He began to see his impatience itself as another kind of obstacle, and slowly he was beginning to learn that the obstacle in front of him was never the only one. There was always another, hidden inside. One afternoon, Master Liang called Wei to join him on a walk beyond the monastery. The old monk carried nothing but a walking stick, moving with slow and steady steps. Wei followed, curious. They walked past the rice paddies, past the river, and into a forest where the trees grew tall and close together. The light of the sun filtered down in broken patterns, and the air was filled with birdsong. After some time, they reached a clearing where a fallen tree blocked the path. Its trunk was wide, and its branches tangled. Wei stepped forward, ready to climb over it quickly, but Master Liang raised a hand and stopped him. "Look carefully," the master said. Wei frowned, unsure what he meant. To him it was just a tree in the way. He looked again. The bark was rough, the roots half pulled from the ground, and small mushrooms were already growing along its side. Sunlight poured into the clearing now that the tree was gone, and in that light new plants were beginning to sprout. Master Liang tapped the trunk with his stick. This tree once stood tall. A storm brought it down. To some, this looks like the end, but look closer. Because of its fall, sunlight reaches the earth. Seeds will grow here. Insects will feed on the wood. Birds will make nests in its branches. Even in falling, the tree gives life. Wei touched the trunk. The wood felt firm under his hand, yet soft in places where moss had already begun to spread. He thought about it. The obstacle of the fallen tree was also an opening. Without it, light would never reach this place. The master continued walking, and Wei followed. Most people, said Master Liang, see obstacles only as loss. They see what has been taken, what is no longer possible. But if they wait, if they look closely, they may see what has been given instead. Every ending brings another beginning. Wei walked in silence, the words circling in his mind. He thought again of his mother's death. He had always seen it as the end of everything. But without that loss, perhaps he would never have come here, never met his master, never begun to see the world differently. Painful as it was, maybe even that had opened a path. Later that day, as they returned to the monastery, the sky darkened suddenly. Thick clouds gathered, and a storm swept down the valley. The monks hurried to cover the gardens and secure the wooden shutters of the hall. Rain fell in heavy sheets, thunder rolled across the mountains, and wind shook the trees. Wei stood at the doorway, watching the storm rage. He felt small, powerless against the force of nature. When the storm finally passed, the courtyard was flooded with water, branches scattered, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. The monks went out to clean, picking up broken pieces of wood, sweeping away the water. Wei worked alongside them, his robe soaked, his arms tired. He felt discouraged. The neat garden was ruined. All their careful work seemed wasted, but Master Liang only smiled as he walked through the muddy ground. "Look," he said, pointing to the soil. "The rain has softened it. Tomorrow it will be easier to plant. The wind has carried away weak branches. The storm destroys, yes, but it also prepares. Even in destruction there is a gift." Wei stared at the muddy field and felt a flicker of understanding. Perhaps the obstacle was never just the obstacle. Perhaps it was also a teacher wearing a hard disguise. That evening, as they ate their simple meal of rice and soup, Master Liang told another story. "There was once a traveler," he began, "who set out to find wisdom. He climbed mountains, crossed rivers, wandered through forests, always searching for the right teacher. But everywhere he went, he found only difficulty. Roads washed out, bridges broken, wild animals blocking his way. Tired and frustrated, he returned home, believing he had failed. When he arrived, he sat in his garden and looked at the paths he had taken. Only then did he see. The broken bridge had taught him patience. The steep mountain had taught him endurance. The wild animals had taught him courage. Every obstacle he met had already been the teacher he was looking for." The monks listened in silence. Wei felt the story settle into him like a stone sinking gently into water. He thought, what if every obstacle I meet is already the teaching I seek? What if the path is never somewhere else, but always right here, in whatever is in front of me? Days turned into weeks. Wei kept practicing. He carried water more slowly. He worked in the fields with patience. He watched his thoughts more carefully during meditation. But one evening, a deeper test came. A group of villagers arrived at the monastery carrying a sick child. The boy was pale, his breathing shallow, his fever high. His parents begged the monks for help. The monastery had no doctors, but they had herbs, clean water, and experience in caring for the sick. Wei was asked to help tend to the boy through the night. At first he felt fear. What if the child died while in his care? What if he failed? The thought of the parents' grief pressed heavily on him. He wanted to run, to give the task to someone wiser. But Master Liang looked at him and said simply, Wei, this is your path tonight. So he stayed by the boy's side. Hour after hour, he wiped the sweat from his brow, gave him water to sip, cooled his body with wet cloths. The boy moaned and twisted, sometimes falling still, sometimes shaking with fever. Wei's heart pounded, his arms grew weary, but he did not stop. Every moment felt like an obstacle. Fear, doubt, exhaustion. Yet he met each one as best he could. By morning, the boy's fever broke. His breathing eased, and color returned to his cheeks. The parents wept with relief, bowing in gratitude. Wei, though exhausted, felt something new in his heart. The obstacle had not only been the boy's sickness, it had been his own fear. By walking through it, he had discovered strength he did not know he had. That day, as the sun rose higher, Master Liang spoke to him quietly. Wei, do you see now? The path will never be free of obstacles. Each day will bring them in some form. But every obstacle is the path itself. You do not need to search for another road. You only need to meet what is before you. Wei bowed deeply, tears in his eyes. He was beginning to see, not just with his mind, but with his whole being. The boulder on the mountain, the heavy basket, the cracked pot, the fallen tree, the storm, the sick child, each one was the same teaching, wearing a different face. That night, as he lay down to rest, Wei whispered to himself, the obstacle is the path. This time the words were no longer strange. They were alive inside him, like a flame that would not go out. And with that flame, he drifted into sleep, ready for whatever the next day would bring. The sun rose the next morning, pouring golden light over the monastery roofs, drying the wet stones after the storm. Birds sang from the treetops, their voices carrying across the valley, clear and fresh, as if the world itself had been washed clean. Wei woke with a strange lightness inside him. The night before, he had whispered the words, "The obstacle is the path," as if they were a prayer. Today, he felt them quietly working in his chest, like a small seed beginning to sprout. Yet even with that seed, life continued as before. The monks swept the courtyard, carried water, cooked meals, studied scriptures, and sat in meditation. Nothing outwardly had changed, but Wei noticed he carried himself differently. When the bucket felt heavy, he did not curse it silently. When the work stretched long into the heat of the afternoon, he did not wish it away. He breathed, and he remembered, this is the path. But peace, like the weather, never lasts in one shape. It changes, it tests, it surprises, and soon Wei would be tested again. A month later, the monastery received news that a nearby village was suffering from a poor harvest. The rains had come too hard, washing away the young rice shoots. Families were hungry, children thinner than they should be. The abbot of the monastery decided they would share their own stores of grain and send a group of monks to help the villagers rebuild their terraces. Wei was chosen to go. At first, he felt honored. He imagined himself walking into the village, helping the poor, perhaps even being thanked. But when the journey began, it was not like that. They walked for hours in the heat, carrying sacks of grain on their backs. His shoulders burned, his feet ached, and sweat poured down his face. By the time they reached the village, he was sore and exhausted, and the welcome was not warm. The villagers, worn down by hunger and fear, looked at the monks with suspicion. One man shouted that the grain would not be enough. A woman accused them of arriving too late. Another asked why monks lived in comfort while villagers starved. Wei felt anger rise inside him. He wanted to defend the monastery, to explain that they too lived simply, that they had walked for hours to bring what little they had. But Master Liang only bowed his head and began to unload the sacks quietly. Wei bit his tongue and followed. They worked until nightfall, carrying the grain into storage houses, helping the families repair broken walls. No one thanked them. No one smiled. Wei felt bitterness gnaw at his chest. That night, as they lay on the floor of a villager's hut, Wei whispered to Master Liang, "Why do we help if they do not even see it? Why should we give when they only complain?" Master Liang turned his head, his eyes reflecting the glow of a small oil lamp. "Do you help for their thanks, Wei, or because it is the path?" Wei did not answer. He stared at the dark ceiling. In truth, he had wanted the thanks. He had wanted to feel noble, useful, important. But now he saw the obstacle, his own pride. The next day, they worked in the rice fields with the villagers. The mud sucked at their feet, the sun scorched their necks, and the work was slow. At first, Wei grew restless. But then he remembered, this too is the path. He let go of the thought of thanks. He bent, planted, lifted, carried. Slowly, his mind grew quiet. By the end of the day, his body was sore, but his heart lighter. One evening, as he rested near the fields, an old woman approached him. Her back was bent, her hands rough from years of work. She pressed something into his palm, a small rice cake wrapped in a leaf. "For you," she said softly, almost shyly, before walking away. Wei opened it. It was plain, simple, yet he tasted it as if it were a gift beyond measure. In that small act, he felt the truth. Gratitude does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. When the monks finally returned to the monastery, Wei walked differently. He carried no pride, no expectation. He understood now that even unthanked work was still part of the path. But the world was not finished with him. A greater obstacle lay ahead, one he could not have imagined. It came during the winter, when the mountain passes filled with snow and the nights grew bitter cold. A messenger arrived at the monastery, breathless and trembling. Bandits had raided a neighboring village. Homes were burned, food stolen, people injured. The villagers begged for help, fearing the bandits would return. The abbot gathered the monks. "We are men of peace," he said, "but peace does not mean turning away from suffering. Some of you will go and bring aid." Wei felt fear coil in his stomach. He had heard stories of bandits, wild, desperate men with knives and swords. He was no fighter. He had no weapon, no skill in battle. His only tools were his hands, his prayers, his willingness to serve. But he also knew, if the obstacle is the path, then fear itself was the obstacle before him now. So he volunteered. The journey to the village was harsh. Snow stung their faces, and the cold cut through their robes. When they arrived, the sight was worse than he had imagined. Blackened walls of houses, the smell of smoke still lingering, frightened eyes peering from broken doorways. The monks moved quickly, tending to the wounded, giving what food and blankets they could spare. Wei helped a man with a broken leg, cleaning the wound, binding it with cloth. His hands trembled, but he kept working. That night, the villagers huddled in fear, whispering that the bandits would return. Wei sat awake, his heart pounding. If they came, what could he do? He had no strength to fight. Yet he remembered Master Liang's words. The path is always what is before you. The bandits did come. Near midnight, shadows moved at the edge of the village, torches flickering. Shouts rang out. Men ran through the snow, weapons in hand. Wei's breath caught. He wanted to hide, but instead he stepped forward into the open square. His legs shook, but he bowed, palms pressed together. The bandits stopped, surprised. Wei spoke, his voice steady though his heart raced. "We have no weapons here. Only food, only healing. If you must take, then take. But know this, every seed you steal now will not feed your hunger later. Stay, and we will work together to plant. Burn us, and you burn yourselves, too." For a moment, silence. Then one of the bandits laughed harshly, but another lowered his torch. Perhaps it was the sight of monks standing unarmed in the snow. Perhaps it was the quiet strength in Wei's trembling voice. Perhaps hunger itself had softened them. Whatever the reason, they did not attack. They took some food and left, vanishing into the trees. The villagers stared at Wei in disbelief. His knees gave way, and he sank into the snow, shaking with relief. He had done nothing heroic, nothing violent, yet somehow the obstacle had passed. The next morning, as the sun lit the frozen roofs, Master Liang placed a hand on his shoulder. "You see, Wei, courage is not the absence of fear. It is meeting fear and walking anyway. The obstacle was your fear of the bandits. You met it, and you found the path through." Wei bowed his head, his breath misting in the cold air. In his heart, he felt both exhaustion and peace. When they returned to the monastery weeks later, he was no longer the same boy who had once pushed impatiently against heavy baskets and cursed cracked pots. He had faced hunger, anger, pride, fear, even danger. Each time he had wanted to run. Each time he had stayed. And each time he had discovered something beyond the obstacle: patience, humility, gratitude, courage. That night, sitting by the dim light of an oil lamp, Wei thought of his journey. He thought of the boulder on the mountain, the storm, the sick child, the hungry villagers, the bandits in the snow. And slowly, he began to see them all not as separate events, but as one continuous teaching. Each obstacle was not against the path, it was the path. He closed his eyes, breathing softly, and for the first time he did not long for an easier road. He only whispered, "Whatever comes, I will walk it." And in the silence of the monastery, he felt the path stretch before him uncertain, difficult, but shining with quiet light. The spring thaw arrived slowly, as it always did in the mountains. First, the snow began to soften, melting into rivulets that trickled down the stone paths. Then small green shoots poked bravely through the earth, fragile yet unafraid. The wind lost its icy bite, carrying instead the scent of damp soil and pine. Life stirred again in the monastery gardens. Monks planted seeds, birds returned to the trees, and the sound of rushing streams filled the air. Wei walked through this changing world with a new steadiness. He carried water with the same buckets, swept the same courtyards, studied the same scriptures. Yet the boy who once grumbled under the weight of a bucket now moved with quiet purpose. He had faced hunger, anger, storms, fear, even bandits. And each trial had bent him, shaped him, smoothed his rough edges. He was no longer trying to escape obstacles. He was learning to greet them like old companions. But the path of life never ends, and just as the snow gave way to flowers, another obstacle waited. This time, it was not outside, but within. It began one afternoon during meditation. The hall was still, filled with the scent of incense. Wei sat with his legs folded, his hands resting on his knees, his breath slow. For a while, his mind was calm, like a lake with no ripples, but then a thought rose up from the depths. Who am I becoming? He remembered the words of the villagers, the eyes of the bandits, the lessons of Master Liang. He remembered feeling brave, feeling needed, feeling proud again. A quiet whisper inside him asked, "Am I becoming wise, or am I just wanting to be seen as wise?" The question unsettled him. He tried to push it away, but it returned. He felt the shadow of pride creeping back, more subtle now, hiding in good deeds and calm words. He feared he was still walking in circles. When the meditation ended, he remained seated, troubled. Master Liang, who had watched him with the patience of a father, approached and sat beside him. "Your breath is steady," the master said softly, "but your eyes are restless. What cloud drifts across your mind, Wei?" Wei lowered his gaze. "Master, I fear that even when I do good, pride follows me. Even when I serve, I wonder if I seek to be admired. I do not know if my steps are true." Master Liang smiled faintly. "Ah, you have found the most stubborn obstacle of all, the self. It hides behind every action, every thought, even in kindness. But do not fear this discovery, Wei. To see the self is already to weaken it. The path does not ask you to destroy pride in one stroke. It asks only that you walk with awareness, again and again." Wei listened, but his heart remained heavy. That night, as the moon rose over the dark pines, he lay awake, staring at the beams of the ceiling. Pride was a shadow he could not escape. And yet the words echoed, "The obstacle is the path." Could even pride itself be the path? The next weeks passed, and Wei worked with this new obstacle. Whenever pride arose, when someone praised his steady hands, when younger monks looked up to him, he noticed it. Instead of pushing it away or indulging it, he simply watched. Like a bird landing on a branch, pride would come and pride would go. Slowly, the weight of it lessened. One day, the abbot called Wei to his chamber. The room smelled of sandalwood, lit only by the morning sun streaming through paper windows. The abbot was old, his back curved like a bow, but his eyes clear as spring water. He looked at Wei with kindness. "Wei," he said, "years have passed since you first came to this monastery. You have faced many stones upon your road. Now the time has come for you to walk beyond these walls, to carry the teaching into the world. The monastery is not a cage. It is a well. You have drunk deeply. Now you must carry water to others." Wei's heart stirred. Part of him longed to stay within the safe rhythm of monastery life, the bells, the chants, the quiet gardens. But another part felt the truth. The path was not meant to end where it began. It was meant to flow outward, like the streams that left the mountain to feed the valleys below. So he bowed low and accepted. His journey began at dawn a week later. The monks gathered to see him off, pressing small gifts into his hands: a pair of straw sandals, a simple cloak, a pouch of dried rice. Master Liang embraced him, whispering, "Remember, where the world will give you many obstacles, do not curse them, walk with them. They are your teachers." With that, Wei set his feet on the road. The first village he came to was lively with markets and noise. Children laughed, merchants shouted, animals brayed. Wei felt the weight of many eyes on him. A monk in simple robes was not an unusual sight, but he carried himself with a quietness that drew attention. People asked him to bless their children, to share wise words, to settle disputes. At first, he felt overwhelmed. Who was he to guide them? But then he remembered, the obstacle is the path. His doubt was not a barrier, but an invitation to step forward. So he listened. He spoke simply. He helped where he could, not with grand teachings, but with small acts: mending a fence, fetching water, telling stories by the fire. The villagers began to call him the monk who carries peace. Wei smiled at the name, but in his heart he reminded himself, it is not I who carry peace. It is the path itself. As the seasons turned, Wei wandered from village to village. Sometimes he was welcomed with open arms. Sometimes he was met with suspicion. Once, in a town gripped by famine, people shouted at him, demanding miracles. He had none to give. He felt their anger like stones against his chest. Yet he stayed, sharing what little food he had, working in the fields alongside them. Over time, their anger softened, not because he solved their hunger, but because he shared in it. Another time, in a busy city, a wealthy merchant invited him to speak. The hall was filled with men in fine robes, impatient for clever words. Wei sat silently for a long time, saying nothing. Murmurs rose, some scoffing, some laughing. Finally, he said only, "The obstacle is the path." Then he bowed and left. Some laughed at his foolishness. But later, a young servant who had overheard came running after him, tears in his eyes. "I have lived with shame all my life," the boy said, but your words tell me even shame can be walked with. Wei placed a hand on his shoulder. Yes, walk with it, and it will show you the way. So it was that Wei's name began to travel further than his feet. People told stories of him, though he never sought it. He became known not for miracles or speeches, but for the quiet way he faced whatever was before him. Years passed. His hair grew streaked with grey, his face lined by sun and wind. He had walked valleys, rivers, forests, and towns, and everywhere he found the same truth. No road was free of stones. People suffered in many ways: hunger, fear, loss, loneliness, and always they believed the obstacle was in the way. But Wei would remind them gently, the obstacle is not in the way. The obstacle is the way. One autumn evening, after decades of wandering, Wei returned at last to the mountain monastery. The gates were weathered, the pines taller, but the air was the same, still, clear, carrying the call of distant bells. Younger monks greeted him with awe. To them, he was a legend, but to Wei, he was only a traveler returning home. He found Master Liang sitting by the garden pond, older now, his hair white as snow, his breath slower. Yet his eyes lit up at the sight of Wei. "You have walked far," the master said, his voice thin but warm. Wei knelt beside him. "Yes, master. And everywhere I went, I found obstacles. And everywhere I went, I found the path." Master Liang smiled, his wrinkles deepening. "Then you have learned the heart of the teaching. Not from me, but from the stones, the storms, the fears, the pride, the hunger, the bandits, the doubts. They were all your masters." The two sat in silence as the wind stirred the autumn leaves. Wei felt no need to speak further. His heart was still, his breath steady. That night, as he lay once more in the small room where he had first dreamed of an easier life, Wei whispered to himself, "The obstacle is the path." And he understood now it was not just a saying, not just a lesson. It was the very way of life. He closed his eyes, not fearing what obstacles tomorrow might bring. For tomorrow, too, would be the path. And so the story of Wei, the boy who once grumbled at heavy buckets, became the story of a man who walked through storms, fears, and doubts, and found in every obstacle the very road he was meant to travel. Not because the world grew easier, but because he had learned at last to walk it as it was. And so, dear listener, we reach the end of tonight's journey. The path we have walked together reminds us of something simple, yet easily forgotten, that every obstacle we meet is not a punishment, not a mistake, but part of the road itself. Just like Wei, the young monk, we often wish life would be smooth, free of stones and storms. But it is those very stones that strengthen our steps, those very storms that teach us how to bend without breaking. The obstacle is not blocking you, it is shaping you. As you lie down now, let your breath soften. Feel the weight of your body sink into the bed. With each exhale, imagine setting down the burdens you carried today. The worries, the doubts, the unfinished tasks, they can all rest for now. You do not need to fight them tonight. Like the cracked pot watering flowers, like the heavy basket that taught patience, your struggles are not wasted. They are part of your path, and they are guiding you somewhere meaningful. So close your eyes and let peace surround you. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be, and that even the hardest challenges are quietly leading you home. May your sleep be deep, may your dreams be gentle, and may you wake with a lighter heart. Remember, the obstacle is the path, and you are already walking it.